Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's learn a little bit of Torah from the Parsha. The Torah tells us, right at the beginning of Parsha Mishpatim, these are the Mishpatim, laws governing, Mishpatim generally are laws governing societal interactions. And the first thing he speaks about is Kitikne Eved Ivri, speaks about the acquisition of an Eved Ivri. And it's interesting, why would all the societal laws begin with the concept of the Eved Ivri? And Eved Ivri is a Jewish slave, as opposed to an Eved Kanani, a non-Jewish slave. The Netziv points out the reason why an Eved Ivri is called an Eved Ivri and an Eved Yisraeli. Call him an Eved Yisrael. He says because the Mistamu Adam Zol B'Yosef Ve'en Alav Ele Shem Ivri. He says, why would a person be sold into slavery? Either because they need the money, because they're just slaves, or because they've stolen, they're in debt, and then they're sold by the Beis Din into slavery. And because of that, they're not in Yisrael. The name Yisrael is clear from the Netziv that the name Yisrael is an appellation of deep kavod. And if a person is so poor and a person is so downtrodden that they don't have that self-worth to that degree, then they're no longer called a Yisrael. They would be called an Ivri. Okay. But why does it start with this? So the Netziv says, Hachel b'mishpat avadim. The reason why it starts with the mishpat of the avadim, the law of the avadim, of the slaves, lefi ma shneimer b'reish Aseret Adibros, because it says in the beginning of the Aseret Adibros, Ani Hashem asher tzitzicha me'beis avadim, I am Hashem who took you out of the house of Avdus, of the house of slavery. Lachein yefshar liYisrael liyois eved b'chol dinei eved Kanani. It's not possible for a Jew to be a slave in the same way as a non-Jew is. It's impossible because we were taken out of the Beis Avadim. Therefore, we have specific halachas that govern the way a slave needs to be dealt with. So what happens is that a Jew can hold for a slave for 6 years. There is no, it's not an eternal thing, and he's supposed to come out in the 7th year. But what happens is he's got a wife, a Canaanite wife from his master, and he has children with her. And he doesn't want to leave them. So what happens? I love my master, I love my wife, I love my children. I don't want to go out. So what do? You take him El Ha-Elohim. You take him to the Elohim, in this case, meaning the leaders. You take him to the door, or El Ha-Mezuzah, or to the mezuzah of the door. So the door or the mezuzah. And they take an awl and they through his ear they make a hole. And then he's an indentured slave for the rest of his life. It would seem no, Lo'olam doesn't mean the rest of his life. Lo'olam means up till the Jubilee year, and the Jubilee year he goes free. Okay, let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, who's the Elohim? Lebeis Din. That they, the Beis Din, have to allow the fact that they had sold him into slavery. Says, why would you take him to the mezuzah? Maybe only the mezuzah is the right thing. So he says, Hikish delet the mezuzah. That the door and the mezuzah are connected. Ma mezuzah mu'umed avdel me'omed. So he says that both of them are standing up, and so therefore they get either both. Why? What does he do? He knocks it into his ear, and Rashi points out that it has to be the right ear. There's a whole lot of discussion around that. The question really is, why is it that he knocks it into his ear, and why dafka at the door of the mezuzah? Rashi says, Rabbi Shimon ayadorish mikrazek minchoim. Rabbi Shimon explained this, and he says the following: what's the difference between a delet and mezuzah? Why don't you take him to the table? At the end of the day, you're supposed to put a hole in his ear. What's the difference where you do it? Amar Chadosh Baruch Hashem says, delet mezuzah sheyu a'idim b'mitzrayim. The delet and the mezuzah, the door and the mezuzah were the aidim, were the witnesses in Mizraim. That when I passed over the mashkof, over the door, over the lintel and the mezuzahs, and I said, Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim, the bnei Yisrael are slaves to me. They're my slaves, and no one else's slaves. So this guy's now he's gone out of his way to acquire a master for himself, that such a person needs to be forced, shown to be a slave that he is in front of the door on the mezuzah. Now, the interesting question is, what's this all about? Why the ear? So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Oizen Zoy Sheshama al Har Sinai lo tignov. The ear that heard on Har Sinai, you shouldn't go steal, and the stealing is therefore he becomes indebted to the person that he stole from. But he went and he stole. That such a person is going to get a hole in his ear. Oh, but what happens if what happens if you're so impoverished he has to sell himself? The person who heard at Har Sinai that we are avodim to Hashem, he went and he sold himself as a slave to somebody else. So that's a person will get that reminder in his ear. Now the question actually really is that how do you connect the Lotignov to this whole story of all the mitzvahs in the Aseret HaDibros? Why Dafka Lotignov? Why does it specifically speak about the theft? So I saw a beautiful idea that is by the Chasam Sofer, and the Chasam Sofer says the following. He says, you know why? You know what the connection is all under these two things, that between the mezuzah and the Lotignov that Rashi wants to bring in. And he says the following. He says, you understand, when that person stole believing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't see him. He stole. Why did he stole? Because he did. He went into the very, very quiet late at night when nobody could see, obviously not realizing that Hashem could see him as well. And he stole whatever he stole, and then he becomes indebted because of his theft, and then he goes into slavery. Says the Chasam Sofer the following. Kavanato ki aganav ose ayin shel maila ki ilu eino roeh. The ganav makes the eyes of heaven as if he doesn't see. Umashgiach, and he doesn't have any hashgacha on the world. And he wants to make it as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't see what's going on in the dark places, in the hidden places. And he forgot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu El Ra'i. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a seeing God. He sees everything. And this is a secret that we need to understand. Where did they put the blood? As Rashi pointed out, that the blood of the mashkof and the mezuzah, of the lintels and the mezuzah, are part of this process of doing the hole in the ear. Where did they put the blood? So if we look carefully, the Chazal tell us that the blood wasn't on the outside. The blood was on the inside of the door. The doors were closed, and there was blood on the inside of the doors. HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw the blood, even though he was outside the house, he could see inside. And therefore we see that there is nothing that one can hide from the Ribono Shel Olam. And that being the case, this person who stole, thinking he could hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, now sells himself full-time into slavery with his master. Such a person goes to the mezuzah, because the mezuzah is for us to remember, and it's an amazing thing. Every single time we walk past the mezuzah, go into our home. We need to understand that it's not only HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in the outside world that has a major impact on who we are and what we are, but we must remember that the mezuzah, not the mezuzah, the scroll, but the mezuzah, the doorpost that we walk into, and that scroll that we have on it reminds us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence also vests within our homes, even in the most intimate spaces of our homes. And that's why, no matter what we do, whether we are going to the bathroom, whether we are having intimate relations, whatever it is that we're doing, all of that is governed by halachic process, because halachic process indicates that is a space where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present as well. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Bezrat Hashem. We'll continue tomorrow.